John Brown's raid on the Harper Ferry. John Brown was one of the most famous abolitionists in our history. John Brown was born at Torrington, Connecticut on May 4th, 1800. John grew up in a Calvinist household. He faced a lot of financial difficulty throughout his life. As a young man, John studied briefly for the ministry, but quit to learn about his father's area of working. He also was an abolitionist who worked with the Underground Railroad and the League of Gileadites, among other endeavors. He also married Beyonce Lusk in 1820, and together they had 7 children before his wife passed away in 1832. Then in 1833, he married Mary Ann Day, and they had 13 children in 21 years. Out of his 20 children, only 12 survived. When John was 12 years old, he saw an African-American boy mistreated, and that's what made him declare war with slavery. He felt that the only way to end slavery was with violence, and in 1839, he decided that the South should be invaded and the slaves should be free at gunpoint. For a decade, John attempted a number of business ventures that weren't successful. He also moved his family 10 times until settling in 1849 on a farm at North Elba, New York. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854 was given, John traveled through the East trying to urge everyone in Kansas to stop slavery, and he gathered money for weapons to achieve this goal. John has once said, "Without the shedding of blood, there could be no remission of sin." He believed that the people who supported slavery and the slave system would not be freed from the guilt of what he saw as a sin until slavery ended. The raid on Harper's Ferry. John was ready to launch a war in 1858. He had both the men and the money to proceed. John had to postpone the launch because one of his followers had threatened to reveal the plan, though. A threat that the blackmailer did follow through on. Brown agreed to go into hiding. Following summer, after a 1-year delay, Brown was eager to try again. The delay had the opposite effect on Brown's plan. Many of the men he had recruited the previous year had changed their minds, moved away, or simply didn't think the plan would work. He had to recruit more men so that they win the war since so many men left. He had only 21 men to go to war with. On the night of October 16, 1859, John set out for Harper's Ferry with 21 men, including 5 blacks and 16 whites, 2 of whom were Brown's sons. He also set out with a wagon full of supplies, leaving 3 men behind to guard the farm. John's men slipped into town easily and captured the armory watchmen. For some reason, though, John had allowed the midnight train to go through, and the train's conductor had sounded an alarm the next morning. Brown and his army rounded up 60 prominent citizens of the town and held them hostage, hoping that their slaves would join the fight. No slaves came to join the fight. Under a white flag, one of Brown's sons sent out to negotiate with the citizens. He was shot and killed. On October 17, 1859, shooting has started between John's men and the local residents. Then soldiers had arrived from Charlestown, West Virginia, and by nightfall, John's men were trapped in the armory's engine room. 5 of his men were wounded. That night, 90 Marines arrived from Washington, D.C. to join the fight against John and his men. When morning came, the Marines stormed the engine house, taking down John and his men with their swords. John was jailed at Charlestown for a week. Then he had a trial. He was convicted and sentenced to death on November 2nd. He was hanged a month later on December 2nd, 1859, with 4 of his men. John Brown had become a legend after that.